I'm Greg.
And I'm Brendan.
And we're the editor and technical editor of Engine Builder.
And we love all kinds of engines.
And making as much horsepower as possible. That's why we're going into shops to find out what we can get built on both a mild budget and a wild budget to see who gets the most bang for their buck.
This is mild versus wild. Horsepower at any cost.
Hey guys, we're here today in Canton, Ohio, the home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the location of Zeigler Diesel Performance just behind us. Today, we're looking to find out how much horsepower we can maximize out of a 5.9 liter Cummins engine on both a mild budget and a wild budget.
More specifically, we're talking about the Gen 3 5.9 Cummins platform, which was the first Cummins with the 24 valve engine to feature the Bosch common rail injection system.
This then new technology provided a big leap in performance and efficiency over previous Cummins engines, and today those features can be significantly improved upon with the help of some modern day performance parts.
However, maximizing horsepower always comes at a cost. We know not everyone can approach an engine build with the same budget, so today each of us is going to discuss a 5.9 Cummins rebuild for a street strip application with Zeigler Diesel Performance owner Justin Zeigler. One of us will get the mild budget of $5,000, the other will get the wild budget of $60,000.
The only caveat is that we will both need to at least keep the stock block in our builds. At the end of the day, we'll discuss who gets the most horsepower gain per dollar based on the potential upgrades to the 5.9 Cummins. Okay, well enough of this talk. Let's see who gets what budget.
Yeah, how do you want to do that?
Let's settle it with some old-fashioned rock, paper, scissors. All right, so it looks like I'm gonna have the mild budget for today. So let's go talk with Justin. Hey guys, we're here with Justin Zeigler of Zeigler Diesel Performance to talk about the mild build of the 5.9 Cummins. And Justin, thanks for having us in today.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could tell the folks a little bit about the shop and what you guys kind of specialize in here.
Okay. I mean, we're fortunate enough, we pretty much work on everything and diesel related, from, like little TDI, Volkswagens all the way up to big, Class 8 trucks.
Yeah.
For the most part, do in-house engine builds, in-house training builds, unless it's, big horsepower applications. We always go to Fire Punk for those trainings. It's nothing we can't do nothing we found we can't do yet.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Been doing this a long time.
And you guys will work on all three of the big diesel platforms?
Yeah.
Obviously the Cummins, like we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, the Cummins, Powerstroke, and Duramax, we are proficient in all three.
Fantastic. Well, Justin, let's dive right into this mild build. Again, I'm looking for a street strip application, and just trying to maximize horsepower of my 5.9 Cummins engine.
Okay.
And yeah, I got a $5,000 budget. What are some of my options for really maximizing it?
Well, I mean, before we really get started, I would want to check the truck out, make sure everything's healthy, so we're not chasing problems down the road. 5,000 isn't a bunch to work with as far as for a street strip application. I would start with the basic stuff. Once we make sure the truck's healthy, do kind of a once over, good maintenance. Double check the trans. Drop the trans pan, make sure there's not excessive debris in there. Okay. Do a band adjustment, change a fluid filter, that kind of thing. Strongly recommend doing the valves on the engine, so most people overlook that. And then we can kind of dive right in. I would start with, like a fast 165 lift pump. We'd use our sump that we have built for us. Then from there, you'd be looking at like an S&B cold air intake, Flow Pro 5-inch turbo back exhaust. Then we would in-house EFI Live tune it. Give you 5 tunes on a switch. Most of those trucks, usually, from our experience on the dyno, with everything stock, will make between 515 and 520 wheel horse.
Okay.
Real close to 1,000 foot-pounds of torque.
Okay. Is there any chance to upgrade the turbo, stock turbo, in lieu of something else, or is that not feasible with $5,000?
Not really feasible with the $5,000. We always suggest, if you're going to do a turbo, head studs, valve springs, push rods, like kind of got to do the supporting mods to make it live.
You're gonna end up breaking some stock parts if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, the head gasket will pay the toll for sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, we always test the fuel components. Make sure injectors are happy, make sure the CP3 is doing its job, which we do a lot of that when we data log it, when we tune it. After we've determined at stock level that it's happy, we start playing with tuning and data logging, which is the key for everything, and go from there. But I mean, that would be a solid, little over 500 horse truck. Be a fun street truck. To really go beyond that, you'd be looking at some pretty expensive stuff. Head studs, valve springs, push rods, injectors, turbo, and then I mean, obviously the trans is always a weak link.
Right. So
stock trans, I mean, you're pretty much pushing its life at that 500 horse mark.
Right.
So
okay, but those are pretty much the basic things.
Yeah,
for $5,000 that's gonna get the truck, get the engine set right, and maximize some horsepower in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would definitely be happy. Like I said, that's why we data log them to make sure everything is happy, doing what we're telling it to do, and not fighting us along the way.
Okay. And about how long does a job like that take you guys?
A couple days tops.
Okay.
Pretty much when Dougie gets you scheduled in, we bring it in and tear into it.
Yeah.
So, I've done those builds in a day. I like to tell everybody to plan for 2 days, so I have time to data log it.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, I noticed you got some AMSOIL sitting back here. Is that something that I could use in the truck? What weight would you recommend? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If that's what you want to run, we can definitely use that as well. The 1540 full synthetic would be ideal for that truck. Okay. It's a good, everyday driver engine. Right.
So
perfect. Well, Justin, that all sounds great. I appreciate you sitting down with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
They're crazy.
Okay, Justin, I got a little bit of a dilemma here, just a small budget of 60 grand to work with. So you think you can handle, building me something with some decent power for 60 grand?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of power are you thinking?
I mean, I'd like to have, over 1,000 for sure, as high up, if I could get 2,000, but I don't know how much we can run on the street with that kind of power.
Yeah, it's a little tricky on the street.
I want turbos. I want like compound turbos.
Okay.
And I want to be able to spray it, for the track, and then maybe a couple times showing off on the street, but I want to be able to run it on the street, regularly. Maybe not every day, but I want to be able to drive.
Play with on the street and go to the track and be competitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely.
And I want it to look cool. It's got to have some good looking parts. So when I lift up the hood, it's got to look impressive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, on the turbo side, we would start with, I'd have Jake Slosher come over from Slosh Fab. Obviously, when the engine's done, we'll have him build the compound setup. For something like that, I would say, an S366 with a S480, underneath of it would be an ideal setup. Spools very fast. You can still tow a trailer with it if you want, once we get the tuning dialed in. And, I mean, it'll make well north of 1,000 fuel only on that setup. And then we'd put a big external gate so that if you spray the nuts off of it, it's going to be okay.
It'll live.
Yeah, it'll be happy. Similar setup, some we've been 1,400 horse with.
Okay.
With these.
And that in torque wise, what is that? That ends up being, you have the horsepower. It's the torque. I mean, if you have the smaller horse, usually like in the stocks, you're getting almost double the torque in those setups. Typically,
I mean, like on the huge horsepower applications, we try to keep them out of the torque range. Like on my race truck, at Firepunk made over 2,000 horsepower, but it was only like 2,500 foot-pounds of torque.
Gotcha.
Because we start in the runs out later because the torque that it's capable of would just break everything. I mean, you could never build anything to handle it.
Do you spin them? They turn a lot higher RPM at that kind of.
Yeah, at that power range. I mean, we pretty much start a dyno run at like like $3 grand and drag it out to 5.
Yeah.
Just to try to keep it out of that torque range, because it's going to make so much torque, down at that 2200, 2400 RPM range. It's just nothing's ever, the dyno's going to have a hell of a time harnessing it, and it's ultimately the block will take the toll.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, these blocks, unfortunately, at horsepower, blocks don't live forever.
Right.
At the power we're playing at.
So, and this would be a stock block.
Yeah, something like that for a nice, street track truck, in the 1,000-1,400 range. The stock block would be fine. We'd put D&J rods in it. If you're going to regularly spray it and run multiple kits, be really hard on it with spray, which is fine, we would look at the FSR D&J pistons.
Okay.
Their billet pistons are a lot more forgiving with spray than than a factory piston.
Are they just stronger? Is it just how they're?
It's an actual billet piston.
Billet. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they make them in house. They got a forged ringland.
Okay.
We run it in all our big power engines.
Oh, okay.
Use total seal rings.
Yeah.
They don't have as much life on the street. I mean, it's not a 100,000-mile engine by any means.
Right.
But
how much? Obviously 100,000 miles. That'd be a long time. But how long do you think an engine like that could live?
It all depends on how it's treated.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it could live quite a long time if you keep the temperatures in check. Take good care of it. Good maintenance is going to be a key with something like that. You don't want to. I mean, I wouldn't be driving to get groceries every day,
right.
or driving back and forth to work every day. But once, twice a week,
sure,
a couple times a month, no big deal.
Go to different shows with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What about like tune-wise? Would I have any switchable tunes?
Yes. A build like this, we'd ultimately take it down to fire pump, strap it on the dyno. Levon or Larson would work with us on getting the tunes dialed in. An engine setup like this, to make that kind of power, you're talking big injectors, big CP3s, a very good flowing head. I would use, on that particular engine, we'd probably use a stage 2 D&J head, because it works. I mean, I can call up Drew, and it ships to the shop, and we bolt it on.
You bolt it on, and it's ready to go. But you got to do definitely, have a strong bottom end, and the foundation has to be there, right?
We'd drill it and tap it for 14 mil mains. Run a full girdle.
Okay.
I personally, when I assemble an engine, I send everything out and have everything balanced. I'm just particular with that. We use a little bit different bearing package than some guys are running. We use a coating that actually impregnates the material.
Okay.
We've shown very good luck with that. In the race applications, all the sled pull engines we do have lived very happily and make some very impressive power and live. That's the biggest thing.
How many, maintenance-wise, for something like this? Now, we use an AMSOIL. What AMSOIL can I use, for the street? What would you recommend?
Well, in an engine like that, we'd probably use their Dominator, that 2050.
Okay.
That full synthetic race oil.
And how many oil changes? Would I have to do a lot of oil changes and filter changes?
It's really hard to say. That's that variable. I mean, you're gonna have to keep an eye on it. Like if you go out to a weekend race and you're abusing it all weekend, you drove it there, you're abusing it all weekend, you're driving it home, I would probably change the oil before you go out next time.
Yeah.
Oil's cheap in the grand scheme of things versus tearing up an engine for no reason.
Yeah, if you're spending $60K to, a little bit on the oil is probably worth it. What about fuel-wise? Do you can you run any kind of diesel fuel, like pump fuel in it, or do you have to have to get to that level of power? Do you need?
Well, I mean, it would make that level of power on just right out of the pump diesel fuel.
Oh, okay.
I would strongly suggest a set of Exergy 250% to 300% injectors. You have kind of a choice if you want to run dual pumps for that wow factor. It looks cool when you pop the hood. You can run dual pumps. I would say put a 12 mil in the factory location, their Sportsman pump over top. It would have fuel for days.
Right.
If you want to stay with a single pump, we'd use their 14 mil race pump. I know guys have made 1,600 horse on fuel on that pump as a single.
Do you see an advantage to having the duals?
I do. I see a little bit of advantage as far as being able to keep up with fueling.
Yeah.
I like a single pump for a street truck for simplicity. If you shred a serpentine belt on the road when you're driving to an event, you can go to any parts store and get the serpentine belt you need.
Right.
You're not running a specialty belt for that extra pump.
That's a good point. Yeah, so I'd probably say I would stick with the single just because of that.
Yeah, and it wouldn't hold you back on power at all. No, I mean, that pump is...
You have a good pump like that, yeah, you can fuel it.
Yeah, and then we would feed that pump, with a fast 220. Just, you'd have, good, clean fuel supply, good amount as far as quantity, and then that...
Do I get one of those cool Zeigler valve covers and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. Every engine we build here in-house gets our valve cover, also gets our billet freeze plugs.
Okay.
I mean, they look nice.
Yeah.
The machine shop we use,
Do I get the block painted?
Yeah, whatever color you want.
With that green, I like that.
Yeah, same with your with all your intercooler tubings, your turbo covers. Slosh Fab's great about getting them. I tell them, hey, look, this is the color I want, and they show up here in the color that I asked.
Oh, really? Okay.
Ready to bolt on.
So, do you think with the 60K we can beat the I know we can beat the $5,000 build, but it's the per what we were talking about, if that build is basically stock and you're not having to go into it, that dollar per horsepower is a lot lower than what ours is going to be.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to have, but we get into the cubic dollars at that point.
Right.
Raise above like what, 500-600 horsepower on a stock. I mean, how much do we have to do a transmission or anything like that?
Something like that, you definitely need to do a good trans build. That particular setup, I would personally use a Fire Punk Comp 2 with the DPC quad disc converter. It'll handle all the power you're going to throw at it and be happy.
And still, be within a range of, not grenading on you.
Right, exactly. We would make a couple little changes to the Comp 2, probably put the bigger shafts in it.
Yeah.
But other than that, it'd handle anything you'd ever going to throw at it.
But that all adds up because, obviously with that kind of budget, to get to that level, what horsepower wise with this, what we're talking about, what do you think we could get to?
I would believe 1,100-1,200 fuel only would be a reality.
Yeah.
You could probably spray it closer to 1,500, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
Obviously if you're going to run spray quite often, we're going to have to run a big external gate just to keep drive pressure in check. If we're going to set up the nitro setup for you, we'll use the Nitro Express Maximizer 5. So many safety factors we can program into it so that it's gonna keep you from hurting it.
Yeah, so it's basically foolproof for someone that wants to be a little crazy on the button there.
Yeah, well, it would be. We could set up a couple of different things. Usually, guys we build engines for that are trying to be fast, or like our sled pull stuff. I personally go to the track with them when everything's set up, ready to go, so that I can look at everything, get everything adjusted right, make sure everything's happy.
Yeah.
Something like that, we would go to the track with you and try to dial in the nitro setup to make sure the truck and the chassis is going to be happy and it's going to live and go A to B.
Yeah.
So that way you can put anybody behind the wheel and the truck's going to go A to B.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So I think, I'm going to say with our budget, with the spray and all that, 1,500 horsepower.
Yeah, 1,500 I think would be pretty safe.
I got to go talk to Greg and see if I can. I'm pretty sure I won this thing. So, I'll talk to Greg. We're going to crunch some numbers and we'll be back to talk to you.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks.
So with my build for $5,000 on the 5.9 Cummins, I'm looking at about doubling the horsepower, which is pretty impressive for that budget. So, doing a couple calculations versus the spend I have there and the horsepower that I'm gaining, I'm spending about $18 per horsepower gain, which is pretty good. That's pretty good spend on your money. Now, Brendan, on the other hand, he's gaining about 1,200 horsepower over the stock horsepower output, and I think we're getting about $50.
Yeah, it's about $48 bucks per horsepower, but you're getting, and let's put it this way. On his stock level, he doesn't have to go into the, you're really not tearing into the engine much. It's mostly bolt-on.
Obviously, with Brendan's build and that budget and horsepower, you got to get more into the internal components, and that's where the big difference is.
But if you're going dollar for dollar, I'd say you probably won.
Yeah, I think you got to give it to the mild.
Dollar, the mild one.
The mild budget slightly.
Yeah.
But they're both going to be impressive builds and a lot of fun to drive. And we hope you guys get a little bit of something, something out of that, and potentially learn something that you guys can do on your own budget. I'm Greg.
I'm Brendan.
And thanks for watching
Mild versus
Wild.